Jack Flint sat at the massive oak desk in his New York City apartment, staring at a blank laptop screen. He hated that moment before starting work, when his thoughts were still scattered and his fingers hovered over the keyboard, waiting for a command. Two of his books hung on the wall in stylish black frames. One of them, The Ashes of Traitors, became a bestseller, providing Jack with a name in the world of literature. The other, less well-known, remained in the shadow of the glory of the first, but had its own value. It was with her that his path began. Outside, the streets of Manhattan were noisy. The honks of cars, the voices of passers-by, the rhythm of a big city, all this has long become his background. Jack was used to being alone among the crowd, and even enjoyed it. In his youth, he dreamed of recognition, and now that it came, he was more worried not about what critics were saying about him, but about whether he could again write something that would touch the reader's heartstrings. There was a half-finished cup of coffee on the table. Next to it was a crumpled paper napkin with the logo of the coffee shop on the corner of his street. Jack took it with his fingers, kneaded it, and threw it into the trash can. He hated disorder, but there was always chaos around him. However, he could control such chaos. "Damn block," he muttered, leaning back in his chair. He was 35, and he could already consider himself accomplished. Money, fame, contracts for future books, he had it all. But was he happy? A question he asked himself more often than he would like. He once believed in love. Now he only believed in good storylines. Jack wasn't a cynic from the start. Life simply convinced him that naivety is a disease that is better to get rid of in advance. He wasn't always like this. He used to have passion. He remembered spending hours as a child writing stories in notebooks, believing that he would one day become a famous writer. Later, at university, he lived by books, immersing himself in them until late at night. His first stories were not popular, but he did not give up. Now his inspiration was fading. Jack knew that he had to start a new book, but he did not feel the same inner fire that had previously led him. He cursed himself for laziness, for fear of failure, for his reluctance to plunge into this world again. He glanced at his watch. It was already past midnight, but he did not want to go to bed. At the other end of the apartment, light footsteps could be heard. Linda, his wife, was moving around the kitchen. Jack smiled when he heard her humming something under her breath. He was lucky. He was married to a woman who understood him, supported his work, and always knew how to get him out of a creative impasse. "Lynn, can you make me some more coffee?" he shouted, not taking his eyes off the screen. "I'm already on my way," came her voice. A minute later, Linda appeared at the door, holding a mug of steaming drink. Her long blonde hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she had a slight smile on her face. She placed the mug in front of him and leaned down, lightly kissing his temple. "Are you stuck again?" she asked, looking at the blank laptop screen.
Yeah.
"It seems that I have completely forgotten how to write." "Is that what you say, best-selling author?" Linda grinned, sitting down opposite him. "You're just tired. Take a break, clear your head." Jack sighed, taking the mug in his hands. "Maybe you're right, but I need a new idea. Something fresh. Something that will excite me." Linda shrugged, looking at him slyly. "Maybe you will write about us." Jack grinned. "About us?" "About a couple who have been living together for 10 years and are discussing who will buy the milk this time." "Oh, come on," she laughed. "We have our own history. Perhaps it will be more interesting than you think." He thought about it. Maybe it's true. There was a photograph on the wall. He and Linda on the coast of Cape Cod, happy, young, not yet experiencing all the difficulties of marriage and creative crisis. Jack felt something new awakening in him, a weak but tangible impulse towards inspiration. Maybe now is the time to create something real. It was starting to rain outside the window. Jack always loved rainy evenings. There was something honest and real about them. He looked back at the laptop screen, took a breath, and began typing. Sometimes the most interesting stories begin where you least expect them. It was a good start. Jack was born and raised in a small town on the East Coast, where life was slow and everyone knew everyone. There was not much entertainment in this place, and the children came up with their own activities. They built forts from scrap materials, played hide and seek in an abandoned factory by the river, or rode bicycles until dark. But Jack had another hobby since childhood. He loved to write stories. His first book was born in a checkered notebook when he was 7. It was a story about a brave boy who found a door to another dimension in the forest. This door appeared only once a year, on the longest night, and the boy decided to go through it. Then the story became more and more confusing, because Jack kept forgetting what he wrote at the beginning and changing details along the way. However, this did not bother him. The main thing was that he created a whole new world in which everything depended only on him. His mother, Catherine Flint, always encouraged this hobby. She worked as a librarian at the local library, and their house was littered with books. Jack could sit among the stacks for hours, poring over the tattered pages of old books, ghost stories, and fantasy novels. A story should grab you from the first lines, his mother told him, and he always remembered this advice. Jack's father, on the contrary, believed that it was better for the boy to pay attention to more practical things: mathematics, sports, working with tools. He didn't understand how stories about ghosts or ancient civilizations could be useful in real life. "You can't make any money from writing," he grumbled. But Jack didn't give up. He wrote in the evenings, hidden under the covers with a flashlight, and sometimes even brought his stories to school to read to his friends. His second story was about a pirate who found a cursed compass that pointed the way not to treasure, but to his worst nightmares. His classmates listened with bated breath, and even the strict Mr. Robertson, the English teacher, once praised him for his imagination. "Maybe you'll be a real writer, Flint," he said with a slight smile, and this was the first recognition that Jack received for his work. When he was 12, he found an old typewriter in the attic of his grandfather's house. From that day on, everything changed. The letters, clearly printed on the white pages, conveyed a sense of seriousness. Now these were not just children's fantasies, but real stories. He began to imitate the authors he loved: Stephen King, Agatha Christie, Ray Bradbury. But in a small town, his passion for writing made him a little different. While the other boys were kicking a ball or working in their father's auto repair shop, Jack sat with his typewriter and made up stories about maniacs, time travel, and conspiratorial mysteries. It seemed strange, and more than once he heard ridicule directed at him. "Are you writing another horror story, Flint?" they teased him. But as soon as someone asked to tell a new story around the fire, everyone suddenly listened to him with tense faces, clutching their blankets, waiting for the next terrible turn. The most important moment of his childhood was a writing competition among schoolchildren. He wrote a story about an old house in which people disappeared, and then returned years later, but changed. This story brought him first place and the opportunity to publish the text in a local newspaper. When he saw his name in print, he realized that writing was not just a hobby. This is his calling. Jack always believed that every writer should have a muse. Some are inspired by nature, some by music, and others by their first and perhaps only love. For him, Linda became such a person. They met in the fall in the university library when Jack was a second-year student. He had already gained popularity among his peers because his stories were published in the university newspaper, and many recognized him on campus. However, he was not one to enjoy fame. Rather, he lived in a world of his own stories, thoughts, and endless drafts. Linda entered his life as easily and naturally as the pages of a new novel that captivates the reader from the first lines. He noticed her at the table by the window when he went into the library to take another stack of books. Linda sat, surrounded by textbooks, with a thoughtful expression on her face, resting her cheek on her palm. Her long dark hair fell over her face, and her lips moved barely noticeably, as if she was rereading something to herself. At that moment, Jack couldn't explain why she caught his attention so much. Maybe it was the way the sunlight came through the window and illuminated her profile, making it look like she was the heroine of some old movie. They spoke by chance. Jack sat down at a nearby table and opened one of his detective books when he heard her voice. "Do you always read something so dark?" she asked, nodding at his book. He raised his eyes and met her gaze. Brown eyes tinged with honey looked at him with slight curiosity. Well, someone needs to write stories about the dark sides of life, he smiled. She chuckled and introduced herself. Everything has changed since then. Linda became his first critic and most devoted reader. She was never afraid to say if his characters seemed too cardboard or if the plot was losing momentum. But she also admired his ability to describe emotions, details that others simply missed. Sometimes they spent nights in her small apartment, discussing books, sharing their thoughts about life, arguing about whether a detective story could be truly romantic. She always listened to him with genuine interest, and he caught himself wanting to write only for her. He liked to watch her at different points in her life. When she laughed at his sarcastic remarks, when she chewed the end of her pen in concentration while reading drafts of his new stories, when she got angry if he got too carried away with his work and forgot about her requests. Her presence always made him better. Jack often thought that without her, he would not be what he became. All his best ideas came from her support. She was the very muse that writers dream of, the woman who inspired him not only to write books, but also to simply live. One autumn evening, when yellow leaves were swirling in the air, they went for a walk in the university park. This was the first moment when he realized that he loved her. They talked about everything in the world until they reached a stone bridge over a small pond. The water was dark and calm, reflecting the star-filled sky. Did you know that the best books are not just stories, but a reflection of the author's soul? She asked, looking into the water. I think so, he replied. Then you should write as if this is your last chance to say something important. He didn't say anything then, but he remembered her words for the rest of his life. It was they who became his main principle in writing. Years later, already a successful writer, Jack still looked for her gaze in the crowd, still wrote for her, even if at some point the reality began to differ from his ideals. She was his inspiration, his guiding light, his greatest weakness, and his strongest affection. His love for Linda was simple and complex at the same time, like a text in which every word hides something more, and he couldn't imagine his life without her. Jack sat at his desk, lazily twirling a ballpoint pen in his hands. I didn't want to work. Chaos reigned in my head, ideas slipped through my fingers like water. He had been trying to write at least one decent line for an hour, but his thoughts were not coming. Maybe he just needs a distraction, a cup of coffee, a short walk, a conversation with Linda. Linda. He looked at her phone, which she had left on the edge of the kitchen table. A normal thing, nothing suspicious. However, over the past few weeks, Jack had noticed that she had become more secretive. She always had her phone with her. She no longer left it unattended as before. Always turned face down, always on silent mode. And also these frequent delays at work, her absent-mindedness and rare, almost mechanical kisses when she returned home. Something has changed. He felt it with all his skin, but did not want to believe it. The hand itself reached for the phone. He wasn't the type to check other people's messages. He hated this very feeling doubt, suspicion, anxiety. But now something inside him screamed that he had to do it. The screen lit up with a light touch. Password. He knew it the date of their wedding. They were always frank with each other, or at least that's what he thought. Entering the password, Jack opened the messages. His heart began to beat dully in his chest. He flipped through the latest dialogues. Friends, colleagues, Linda's mother, and here it is. D. Only one letter. No photo. No last name. But as soon as he opened the correspondence, the world around him began to collapse. I can't wait to see you again. Yesterday was incredible. You're driving me crazy. Did you tell him you'd be late at work? Do you want to meet at the same place? Jack felt his fingers curl into a fist. His head began to make noise, and his breathing became heavier. He read the messages over and over again, hoping that his mind would sort them out and explain this misunderstanding. But there were no excuses. Everything was obvious. Linda cheated on him. Something broke inside. It was like a slow explosion stretched out over time. He felt as if he had swallowed something bitter and now could not get rid of the taste. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Memories flashed before him. Their first date, her laughter, her eyes full of love, The evenings they spent together discussing his books, her support, her faith in him. And now all this turns out to be a lie. He heard the front door slam. Linda is back. Jack, are you home? Her voice was normal, even. It was as if nothing had happened. He didn't answer. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to take the phone, lock the screen, and put it on the table. He didn't know what to do next. Throw away her things, make a scene, pretend that nothing happened. She walked into the room smiling as if everything was fine. "Hello," she said, coming closer. "How was your day?" Jack looked at her and said nothing. I just watched silently. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what words to choose. Linda frowned. Her gaze darted to the phone, then back to him. At that moment, he understood, she understood everything. Jack sat in a chair, clutching an empty cup in his hands. There was silence in the room, broken only by the ticking of the old wall clock. Linda was in the kitchen, rearranging something in the refrigerator, as if she was trying to look busy, but Jack could tell she was nervous. He knew her too well. He took a deep breath. From the moment he saw the messages, his world was shaken, but instead of a flash of rage, there was icy clarity. He needed to hear it from her lips. "Linda," he called her calmly. She froze, and then slowly turned to him. Tension flashed in his eyes. "Yes. Are you cheating on me?" he asked without preamble, directly. Linda blinked as if she couldn't believe her ears. Then she looked at him carefully, as if assessing his condition. She could have lied, she could have avoided answering, but after a few seconds she exhaled heavily and nodded. "Yes," she said dully. The confession hit him harder than he expected. Although he was prepared for this answer, hearing it out loud was a completely different experience. He felt everything tighten inside him, but he didn't allow himself to break down. "Who is he?" The voice sounded evenly, but with a tinge of bitterness. "This is David," she answered, looking down. The name meant nothing to him, but that no longer mattered. The main thing was that she did not hesitate. This was not an accident, not a drunken mistake, not a passing hobby. "Do you love him?" he asked, feeling the question burn his tongue. She looked up at him, eyes full of pain and guilt. "Yes." The world has finally collapsed. Everything he believed in, their entire life, built on trust and support, now crumbled to dust. Jack felt a wave of pain run through his body, but he still resisted the outburst of emotions. "Are you leaving for him?" The words came out with difficulty, as if each letter was stuck in the throat. Linda nodded again. "I didn't want it to turn out this way. I tried to sort out my feelings. But yes, Jack, I'm leaving." She spoke quietly, almost in a whisper, but every word was like a blade on his skin. "When?" he asked. "Today. I've already packed my things." She said it quickly, as if she was afraid that if she said it slower, she would change her mind. He looked at her, at the woman he loved, whom he considered his muse, his only one. Now she belonged to someone else. "So that's it?" he said with an empty smile. "Just like that? 10 years together, and you just leave?" Linda closed her eyes and then walked over to him, placing her hand on his arm. He didn't pull it away, but he didn't respond to the touch either. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Jack was silent. After all, what can you say when your life is in shambles? He simply closed his eyes, listening to Linda take her bag and the front door slamming. And he was left alone, all alone. Jack sat in the darkness of his apartment, holding a glass of whiskey in his hands. He didn't know which emotion was stronger in him, hatred or love. He spent 10 years next to Linda, idolized her, considered her his muse, and now she's just gone. She left it like an unnecessary draft, carelessly torn from a notebook. He wanted to kill her. Dozens of ways to do this flashed through his mind. I imagined Linda looking at him with frightened eyes, asking for forgiveness, begging for mercy. But he knew he would never do it, because despite all the pain, he still loved her. Jack could take revenge on David, find him, smash his face, ruin his life, ruin his career. But was it worth it? Linda won't come back. She has already made her choice, and if he stoops to revenge, he will lose himself. But he couldn't leave it like that either. He felt empty. He needed to do something to numb the pain, to feel like he was in control of his life again. Another idea came to him. He will write. He will create a story where Linda will recognize herself on every page, where her new life will turn into hell, but not because of revenge, but because of the power of words. He will make her immortal, but not in the form in which she wanted it. She will be the character that all readers hate. And when the book comes out, when it hits store shelves and into the hands of hundreds of thousands of people, Linda will understand. She reads every word and realizes that Jack is no longer hers, that now he belongs only to his anger and creativity. This will be his revenge. He picked up his laptop and started typing. She always thought she could walk away without looking back, but some mistakes are unforgivable. Jack closed his suitcase and took one last look at the empty apartment. The smell of the past still hung here. The old parquet floor remembered Linda's steps, the walls kept her voice, and the kitchen table remembered the morning aroma of coffee that they once drank together. But now all this had become just shadows, ghosts that he did not want to see anymore. His book came out 2 weeks ago. He didn't mention any names, but everyone who knew Linda knew who the main character was based on. The story of a woman who betrayed the one who loved her was written with such cold precision that no one doubted the author's sincerity. The book became popular. Readers discussed the plot, argued about the motives of the characters, and even critics admitted that it was not just talent, but real pain. But this did not give Jack any relief. He won the war, but lost himself. Divorce was inevitable. Linda didn't even try to resist. She just signed the papers and left without saying anything extra. Her new man stayed with her, and Jack no longer wanted to know how their fate turned out. San Francisco, the city where he will start again. Here he had no friends, no past, no memories to escape from. He chose an apartment in the center, a small loft with panoramic windows and views of the bay. He liked this openness, the absence of walls, the symbolic space for a new life. As soon as he stepped out of the taxi and stepped into his new home, he felt a strange mixture of emptiness and relief. The things he brought with him fit into 2 suitcases. He looked around. The room was spacious, the furniture was minimalist, the light fell through the huge windows, filling everything with the golden glow of the sunset. Jack put the suitcase against the wall and went to the window. Somewhere below, cars were humming, people were hurrying about their business, someone was laughing, someone was talking on the phone. Life was in full swing, and he finally felt that he could become a part of it again. He ordered pizza and a bottle of wine. Today, he allowed himself everything. When the courier brought the order, Jack simply sat down on the floor, leaning on the wall, and opened his laptop. The fingers slowly touched the keys. He didn't know what his next book would be about. But he knew one thing for sure. Now he was not writing out of hatred. Now he wrote to live again. A year has passed. San Francisco greeted Jack with cold nights and foggy dawns, but he was used to it. Here he became a different person. Worse or better, he didn't care. He no longer remembered Linda, did not feel pain, did not waste energy on the past. He became more successful. His new book, in which there was not a drop of emotion, but only harsh realism and ruthless truth, sold millions of copies. He no longer wrote out of pain, now he wrote out of strength. But one thing remained the same. He did not trust women. He didn't look for a relationship, didn't believe in love, didn't allow anyone to get close to him. There were only casual connections in his life, cheap and simple. Prostitutes are his way of controlling everything. He paid for the night, and no one had power over him. No false promises, no falsehood, no betrayal. Another evening, Jack walked into a small coffee shop on the corner of the street, not far from his apartment. He visited here often good coffee, a minimum of people, no one distracted. He took a double espresso and sat by the window, staring out at the street. The city lived its own life, bustling, hurrying somewhere. Jack didn't care. He loved solitude. "Can I sit down?" A female voice rang out. He looked up. In front of him stood a girl, very young, no more than 20 years old. Her hair, dark as night, cascaded over her thin shoulders, and her large green eyes shone with lively interest. Her skin was almost porcelain, with a slight blush on her cheekbones. She looked both innocent and daring, combining fragility and confidence. She was dressed simply, but tastefully: a light blouse, skinny jeans, a black raincoat. A light aroma of something floral touched his consciousness, making him remember something long forgotten. "There are plenty of empty seats here," he said, taking a sip of coffee. "But it's interesting for me to sit here," she answered, and sat down opposite him without permission. He looked at her, trying to understand what she needed. She didn't look like the women he was used to seeing lately. There was no pretense or emptiness in her eyes, just a challenge. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "Of course," she smiled. "Jack Flint, best-selling author of the year. A bestseller full of cynicism and truth. A ruthless man who sees right through women. That's what the critics say. But I wonder what is hidden behind this image." Jack grinned. She hooked him. "And who are you? Journalist? Fan? Or someone who wants to know how ruthless I really am?" "Sarah," she said simply, "and maybe a little of all that." She took a sip of her cappuccino and looked at him carefully. "You're too confident, Sarah," Jack said, leaning back in his chair, "and I like it." "You're too broken, Jack," she replied, "and I'm interested in this." He chuckled. Sarah chatted non-stop. Her words flowed in a stream, jumping from one topic to another, as if she had her own chaotic order in her head, in which there was no meaning, but there was a lot of life. Jack listened to her, sometimes grinning, sometimes shaking his head, but did not interrupt. He liked it. "Do you know why people are afraid of giraffes?" she suddenly asked, looking at him with her huge green eyes. Jack took a sip of coffee and raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know that people were afraid of giraffes." "Who told you this?" "Well, I came up with an idea," Sarah honestly admitted, and laughed. "But imagine, they are so tall, they can literally look down on you. It's like someone is watching you, even if you don't want to." Jack shook his head, grinning. "This is the strangest thing I've heard in the last week. So you lead a boring life." She giggled and took another sip of her cappuccino. "What are you afraid of?" Jack thought about it. He was used to deep questions, but this was not the case. Sarah wasn't trying to get something dark out of him. She was just curious, like a child who sees a rainbow for the first time and wants to find out how it works. "I'm afraid of boredom," he finally replied. "I'm afraid that one day things will become predictable." "Then you're lucky," she waved her hand theatrically. "Because I am completely unpredictable." Jack couldn't argue with that. Sarah was chaotic, funny, and light. She didn't seem stupid, but her childish naivety made him feel lighter. It was as if the world had lifted its weight off his shoulders for a moment. They talked about everything. About the strange habits of people on the subway. About why cats have whiskers and why mosquitoes exist. About how ice cream tastes best on a rainy day because then no one buys it and you feel special. "Let's meet again," she said at some point when their cups were already empty. "Aren't you afraid that I'll be predictable again?" he asked with a slight smile. "If you're predictable, then why do I still want to talk to you?" she answered, narrowing her eyes slyly. He couldn't find anything to say. Instead, he simply nodded. "Tomorrow?" he clarified. "Tomorrow," Sarah confirmed, rising from the table. She waved her hand lightly and went out into the street, disappearing into the stream of passers-by. And Jack looked after her for a long time, realizing that, for the first time in a long time, he wanted to see someone again. Jack didn't know what to call this meeting. Date? Hardly. He hadn't been on a real date in a long time, and Sarah didn't seem like the type to follow the standard routes. Dinner, a movie, an awkward goodbye at the door. But he was intrigued, so he simply agreed. They met in the evening in a small bar on the embankment. Sarah arrived first and sat by the window, tapping her fingers on her glass of wine. Her long dark hair was loose, and in the dim light of the lamps she looked almost unreal. "You're late," she remarked with mock sternness. "It's part of my charm," Jack grinned, sitting down opposite. "Keep in suspense." "Quite self-confident," she grinned. "But let's see if you can surprise me." He ordered whiskey and they started talking. First, just about little things. About the weather, about the bar, about how annoying tourists are who take a million photos without noticing the city itself. Then the conversation got deeper. "You know that I write too, right?" Sarah said suddenly, leaning closer. "Is it true?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "And about what?" "About life," she answered mysteriously. "About people. About what we think, but are afraid to say out loud. Sometimes it turns into poetry, sometimes into stories." "Will you show me?" he asked. "Maybe. Someday." She took a sip of wine. "But you, as a writer, must understand that creativity is an intimate thing. It reveals us more than we are willing to admit." Jack knew this all too well. He wrote about his pain, about betrayal, about loss, and now millions of people read his thoughts. Sarah seemed to understand this on some intuitive level. "What are you writing about?" she asked. "About people," he smiled, repeating her words. "About how far we are willing to go for the truth. About weaknesses. About what we are ashamed of." "Interesting. But for example, are you ashamed of something?" Jack thought about it. "I'm ashamed that I was once naive," he admitted. "Believed in things that are not worth believing." "For example, in love?" Sarah guessed. He looked at her, gauging her reaction. There was no mockery in her eyes, just curiosity. "For example," he nodded. Sarah smiled but didn't comment. Instead, she leaned closer. "Then maybe I can make you believe in her again. Or at least try." He didn't answer, but for the first time in a long time, he felt that someone had penetrated him not as a writer, but as a person. Their conversation continued, filling the evening with meaning and hints of something more. They continued to meet. Evenings spent talking were followed by walks around the city at night, spontaneous trips out of town, endless cups of coffee and glasses of wine. Jack felt his defenses gradually crumbling. Sarah did not demand anything, did not try to dominate him, but at the same time she was always there. She was light, free, funny, and absolutely alive. This is what attracted him. That evening they ended up at his house. A small apartment on the top floor of an old building, with panoramic windows and a minimum of furniture. He didn't like filling space with unnecessary things. Sarah walked barefoot on the cold wooden floor, looking at the bookshelves. "You have a real temple of literature here," she smiled, pulling out one of the books. "Look, all the classics are in place. And here are your books. Are you rereading them?" Jack chuckled and shook his head. "I know every word. There's no point in rereading. It's like looking in a mirror, right?" she said thoughtfully. "You see yourself, but differently." He nodded, watching her. Her thin fingers slid along the spines of the books, interest flashed in her eyes. At that moment, he realized that she was comfortable here. She is not just a guest, she fits into this space. Sarah turned to him, narrowing her eyes slyly. "Do you even let anyone in here?" "Only you," he admitted. She stepped closer, sparkles dancing in her eyes. "Then maybe I should feel special." "You're already special, Sarah." She came close and touched his face with her palms. A slow, warm kiss. Not the first between them, but this time there was something different about him. Not just a game, not just flirting. Something deeper, something real. Jack ran his fingers along her back, pulling her closer. Sarah moaned into his lips, barely audible, and it completely drove him crazy. He felt her breathing become ragged, and her hands slip under his shirt. "Are you sure?" he asked, looking into her eyes. She nodded, blushing slightly. "Yes, I want this. I want you." He peered carefully into her face. There was no trace of fear or doubt in her, only determination. When her dress fell to the floor, he knew something was wrong. Her body was soft, flexible, but something in her movements betrayed inexperience. He stopped, looking at her. "Sarah." He ran his hand over her shoulder. "You'd..." She smiled slightly, but there was a hint of embarrassment in her eyes. "Yes, Jack, I've never before." He froze. It was unexpected. "Are you saying that I'm a virgin?" She laughed, looking away. "Yes, I was just waiting for the right person." He ran his fingers over her cheek, causing her to look at him again. "Why me?" She sighed, biting her lips slightly. "Because I trust you. Because you don't just want me, you see me. I wasn't wrong about you, Jack." His heart sank. For the first time in a long time, he felt not only desire, but something more. He kissed her gently on the forehead and then slowly led her into the bedroom. The night was long, warm, filled with touches and whispers. It was not just desire, not just physical intimacy. This was the start of something bigger. Jack began to notice strange things. Several weeks had passed since their first night with Sarah, but she had never invited him to her home. They always met in his apartment, in bars, in coffee shops, and walked around the city, but Sarah's house remained something forbidden. He didn't ask directly, didn't want to put pressure, but doubts gradually crept into his head. That evening they met again at his favorite bar. Sarah arrived later than usual, and there was something unusual in her behavior. She looked around nervously, as if she was looking for someone. "Everything is fine?" Jack asked, sipping his whiskey. "Yes, I'm just tired," she smiled, but her smile seemed tense. He wanted to ask what was bothering her, but she quickly turned the conversation to another topic, telling another funny story. Jack didn't insist, but his intuition told him that she was hiding something. The next day, he decided to ask her directly. They were sitting at a corner cafe that served the best croissants in town when he said casually, "Why have I never been to your house?" Sarah froze for literally a split second, but then smiled as if nothing had happened. "Well, because I have complete chaos there. I'm a creative person, remember? There are books, canvases, and mugs of half-drunk coffee everywhere. I don't think you'll like it," she winked, but Jack noticed the caution in her voice. "Do you think I'll be afraid of chaos?" He smiled, but continued to watch her carefully. "Perhaps," she answered, looking away from the cup. Jack felt slightly uneasy. Something was wrong here. He had never experienced Sarah lying to him, but now there was something subtly strange in her voice. "Okay," he said, deciding not to press it yet. "But if you ever change your mind, I'll be glad to see where you live." Jack began to notice strange things. She and Sarah continued to date, but something in her behavior began to change. One day she was, as he knew her, cheerful, funny, daring. Her speech was fast, her movements were light, she teased him without hesitation, made barbs and laughed, throwing her head back. He liked that about her. She was always a little chaotic, but it was this chaos that made her special. And on another day she became different. The same in appearance, but something was wrong. Her smile was restrained, she was silent more, sometimes looking away in embarrassment. It seemed like something was bothering her, but she didn't say what it was. At such moments, Jack felt strange. He was used to Sarah, who could argue with him for hours, rather than this quiet, thoughtful version of herself. "Everything is fine," he asked one day when they were sitting in his apartment. She looked up at him and smiled slightly. "Of course, I'm just tired," she answered. He frowned, but didn't press. Maybe she had problems that she didn't want to talk about. After all, he is not one to delve into other people's secrets. But this changeability continued. Sometimes she looked at him as if she was seeing him for the first time. Sometimes her movements were more cautious, as if she was afraid of doing something wrong. One day she ordered wine, the next she suddenly said that she didn't drink alcohol. One day she confidently reached out to him for a kiss in a crowded place, and on another she shyly pulled away, blushing from a simple touch. One evening, when they were sitting in a restaurant, Jack could not stand it. "Sarah, you have changed. Is something going on?" he asked directly, looking into her eyes. She blinked as if the question took her by surprise, but then she smiled. "In terms of," she asked innocently. "You are different. One day you are alone, the next you are completely different. You're either not telling me something or..." He paused, searching for words. "Or I'm just going crazy." Sarah laughed quietly and shook her head. "You think too much, Jack. I'm just a living person. I have different moods." He wanted to believe, but somewhere inside something scratched his consciousness. Something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what yet. Jack never thought he could laugh so easily again. With Sarah, or who he thought was Sarah, it came naturally. They sat in a small bar on the outskirts of the city, dimly lit and reeking of cigarette smoke, and jokes fell one after another. "Someday you will be found dead behind this book," Sarah grinned, watching him try to sketch out another scene in a notebook. Jack raised an eyebrow. "At least I'll die for art," he retorted, taking a sip of whiskey. "Yes, and on your grave they will write, 'Cause of death, overdose of sarcasm.'" They laughed. Jack hadn't felt so alive in a long time. Usually he took life too seriously, but with her everything was different. Black humor became their weapon against reality. "Tell me, how do you want to die?" she asked, resting her chin on her hand. "Preferably not in this bar," he answered, looking around at the peeling walls. "Although if they killed me right now, I think the police wouldn't even bother to investigate. They would simply say, 'Well, it's my own fault. I went into the wrong area.'" "That would be an amazing premise for a book," Sarah said dreamily. "He went into the bar to have a drink and came out wearing only a black bag." "Great, then you will write an epilogue." She giggled and shook her head. "You're too confident, Jack. Maybe I'll forget about you altogether in a couple of years." He grinned. "Well, if you forget, I'll definitely make sure you remember me. For example, I will appear to you in your nightmares. Oh yes, like a ghost with a pen in his hand. Finish my book, or I will take your soul." They laughed again, and Jack caught himself thinking that next to her he felt free, without the burden of the past, without pain, without the need to play the role of a serious writer who always knows what to do. "Sarah, have you ever thought that if people told each other everything they think, the world would be a lot more fun?" he asked. "Certainly. But then the world's population would be halved. People can't stand the truth. Perhaps that's why I write books and don't talk to people." She sighed. "Here I am. Only I haven't yet learned how to turn my sarcasticness into text. For now, I'm just saying nasty things out loud. And you do it very well." They clinked glasses and laughed again. Jack woke up in the middle of the night feeling something strange. Sarah, who had recently been sleeping next to her, now lay motionless, as if something was bothering her. It was strange. Usually she fell asleep quickly, curling up in a ball and throwing her leg over him, as if she was afraid that he would go somewhere. But now she was different, quiet, tense. It all started in the evening. They drank wine, talked about stupid things, joked, and everything went on as usual. But when it came to intimacy, Jack felt that something had changed. Sarah, always passionate, always confident, suddenly became slow, cautious, as if she was afraid of something. It wasn't like her. "Everything okay?" he asked, brushing her hair out of her face. She nodded, but her eyes were different. "Of course, I'm just tired," she answered with a forced smile. Jack didn't believe it, but didn't press it. He was used to her games, to her mood swings, to her unexpected antics. Maybe she was just having a rough day. When they were in bed, he felt for the first time that her touch was not so confident. It was as if she were studying him all over again, not as lovers do when they know each other's bodies by heart, but as if she had never done this before. This feeling did not leave him all night, and then he saw blood. A barely noticeable stain on the sheets, but it was enough to make the world stop for a second. He froze, unable to understand what was happening. Everything was confused in his head, but he quickly forgot about it as soon as Sarah started giving him pleasure. Jack didn't know whose idea it was, his or Sarah's. Maybe he suggested it himself after their last strange night. Maybe she was trying to smooth over the tension between them. Either way, they found themselves on a deserted beach under a crimson sunset sky, and the evening seemed almost perfect. Sarah walked ahead, her bare feet leaving light footprints in the wet sand. She seemed calm, carefree, as if nothing had happened. Jack followed her, watching the wind play with her hair. He liked this picture, but something inside did not give him peace. "You are silent," she said, turning around. "I think," he replied. "About what?" Sarah smiled, but something flickered in her eyes that he didn't have time to catch. "About you," he said honestly. about how you can be so different." She took a step towards him and gently touched his hand. "Don't you like that I'm different?" she asked, bowing her head. "I like it," he admitted, "but sometimes it seems to me that I'm meeting not one woman, but two." Sarah laughed as if it was just a joke. Jack smiled back, but anxiety stirred inside him again. He couldn't understand why she reacted as if his words were absurd. They walked further to the surf line. The water rolled onto the sand in quiet, slow waves, as if it was also listening to their conversation. "Could you live by the sea?" Sarah suddenly asked. "Maybe," he replied. "I like the sound of water." He's honest. "Honest?" She raised an eyebrow. "Yes, water cannot lie, unlike people." She looked at him for a second, then laughed and sat down on the sand. "You're too serious, Jack," she said, smoothing the surface next to her with her palm. "Sit down." He sat down, watching her. She looked at the ocean, but her fingers lazily drew circles in the sand, as if her thoughts were far away. "You know, I'm not as complicated as you think," she finally said. "You're just that complicated," he objected. Sarah leaned closer, her lips dangerously close to his. "Maybe you should relax and just enjoy the moment," she whispered. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her breath. Perhaps she's right. Maybe he's just overanalyzing. Perhaps all he needs now is just to be here and now. 3 days passed and Sarah did not answer her calls. At first, Jack tried to remain calm. Maybe she was just busy. Maybe she had problems that she didn't want to talk about. But the more time passed, the more anxiety grew. Usually she got in touch somehow, even if she was busy, and now there is complete silence. Jack dialed her number again and again. The beeps went off, but no one answered. He sent messages, but they remained unread. A variety of scenarios were spinning in my head. She could get sick, could have had an accident, or did she just decide to disappear from his life? No, Sarah is not like that. Closer to the night, Jack decided that he needed where she lived. He found her address. My heart was beating wildly. Now he had a choice: wait a little longer or go to her house right now. But he couldn't wait. Soon he was driving through the night city. Questions were swirling in my head. What would he say if she simply decided to ignore him? How will he react if she's really in trouble? He felt anxiety rising in his chest. Sarah's house turned out to be a small 2-story building with a white facade and a wooden door. Jack got out of the car and stood in front of the porch. The windows were dark, no signs of life. He knocked. No answer. He knocked harder. Jack clenched his hands into fists, trying to calm his breathing. He was about to knock again when the door suddenly swung open. Sarah stood on the threshold. She looked tired and disheveled, but what surprised him most was her expression, a mixture of amazement and slight concern. "Jack," her voice sounded surprised. He took a step forward, peering at her carefully. "Sarah, are you okay? Where have you been? Why didn't you answer calls?" His voice trembled with tension. She looked down and sighed. "Sorry. Everything was too unexpected. I had problems." Jack frowned. "What problems? What's happened?" Sarah opened the door wider and took a step back to let him inside. The room was quiet. There was a half-drunk mug of tea on the table, and someone was lying on the sofa under a blanket. "This is my sister Mia," Sarah said, nodding towards the sofa. "She became very ill, and I had to look after her." Jack turned his gaze to the silhouette under the blanket. He could only see part of the face, pale skin, tangled hair, and closed eyes. The girl was clearly weakened. And the strangest thing is, she looked exactly like Sarah. Jack hesitated, looking at Sarah. "She's your copy." Sarah smiled faintly. "We are twins," she said quietly. "I didn't tell you." He shook his head, peering into the sleeping girl's face. Now everything took on a new meaning. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, turning back to Sarah. "I didn't want to bother you," she admitted, crossing her arms over her chest. "Everything happened so quickly. I didn't even think about explaining myself." Jack took a deep breath, suppressing his irritation. He was angry not at her, but at himself for not guessing right away. You're not alone in this, Sarah, he said softly. Let me stay and help. She looked at him with gratitude, but there was still doubt in her eyes. You are sure? It's none of your business, Jack. Now it's mine, he answered firmly. Come on, tell me what needs to be done. Sarah hesitated for just a second and then nodded. Fine, then help me prepare tea and get medicine. I'm really exhausted already. Jack didn't argue. He walked into the kitchen, knowing it would be a long night, but at least now he was close to where he needed to be. Jack woke up from the barely audible clink of dishes. Sleep had not yet completely left him, but he immediately realized that he was in an unfamiliar place. I remembered he stayed with Sarah to help with her sister. The sun was already breaking through the curtains, painting the room with soft morning light. Turning his head, he noticed that the bed next to him was empty. Sarah was already up. Muffled voices were heard somewhere behind the wall. Jack automatically stretched, about to get up, but the words coming from the kitchen made him freeze. You didn't tell him anything. The voice was slightly hoarse, but recognizable. It was Mia. No, Sarah answered, and there was hesitation in her voice. I don't know how he'll take it. Jack frowned. What are they talking about? Sarah, are you serious? Mia sighed. You hid it for so long, and now he's here. Do you understand that this could come out at any moment? I understand. Sarah raised her voice, but then stopped short, as if she was afraid that he would hear them. But what should I do? Say, hey, Jack, you dated not only me, but also my sister. He'll just leave, and most likely forever. Jack felt his body tense. He held his breath, listening. We thought it all out so well, Sarah continued more quietly. We never stayed overnight together. We changed so that he wouldn't notice. It was almost perfect. Before you get caught up in it, Mia noted. Admit it, you got attached to him. Aren't you? Sarah fell silent abruptly. Mia didn't answer right away. Then she added quietly, I like him too. But he slept with both of us, Sarah. He thinks that all this time he was only with you. How long are you going to hide this? Jack slowly sat up in bed, his heart pounding dully in his chest. His mind was frantically trying to process what he had heard. They switched places. All this time. Has he met both of them? Moments flashed in his head, which now formed a single picture: Sarah's unpredictability, her mood swings, strange details that he had previously attributed to fatigue or character. This was not a mood game, it was a game with him. He ran his hand over his face, feeling how everything inside was turning over. What now? Go into the kitchen and demand an explanation? Or should he first decide how he himself feels about this? He took a deep breath. The question was, did he want to know the whole truth? Jack didn't wait. He stood up from the bed, feeling a mixture of anger and misunderstanding boiling in his veins. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my mind remained cold. He pushed the door and entered the kitchen. Sarah and Mia instantly fell silent. Both froze, like children caught in the act of a crime. Jack slowly looked from one to the other. Crap. They really were copies. Now, looking at them side by side, he realized how similar they were. The slightest differences in facial expressions, posture, intonation, everything that had previously eluded now flashed into consciousness. So I've been dating both of you all this time? His voice was cold and even. Sarah lowered her gaze, but Mia suddenly grinned. Well, technically, yes, she said, taking a sip of tea. But let's be honest, Jack. You didn't even notice. He clenched his fists. Why? He asked, looking directly at Sarah. Why this circus? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Sarah licked her lips nervously and gave Mia an intense look. She shrugged her shoulders, saying, He already knows what to do. Sarah took a deep breath and spoke. We are one-celled twins. We were always together. We always did everything together. People didn't understand us. They thought we were strange. We were told that everyone should have their own life, but for us, it was always unnatural. Mia nods. We were always drawn to the same things, the same people. We even learned to speak at the same time when we were children. Our parents thought we were crazy. Jack frowned. and you decided that I should become a part of this too." Sarah nervously tucked her hair behind her ear. "That wasn't the plan, Jack. I really fell in love with you. But Mia, she also became attached to you. And then," Mia giggled, but quickly stopped under her sister's gaze. "Then I wanted to try it too," she said without hesitation. "You see, we always do everything together, even the most important things." Jack tensed. "Did you want?" At the same time. He wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Sarah was confused, but nodded. "Yes, we decided that we wanted to lose our virginity together. But there was no suitable guy for Mia. We've been talking about this for months, you know? This was something important for us." Jack ran his hand over his face. Hell, he didn't even know how to react to this. "And you let her take your place?" he asked Sarah. "It was her decision," Mia interjected, crossing her arms. "She liked you. I wanted to understand how Sarah feels when she's around you." Jack sank into his chair, feeling that the world around him had become too strange. His gaze darted between the sisters. One of them bowed her head as if she was feeling slightly guilty, while the second looked at him defiantly, as if she likes to watch his reaction. "So what the hell now?" he asked, looking at them. "What do you want from me?" Sarah curled her fingers on the edge of the table as Mia grinned and leaned closer. "Don't you feel it, Jack?" Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "You have already become a part of us." Jack clenched his jaw. A hurricane of anger, desire, shock, and strange curiosity boiled in my chest. He didn't know what to expect next, but he knew for sure he wouldn't get out of this game just like that. Jack sat at the kitchen table, his eyes darting between his two sisters. His head was buzzing with the realization that everything he knew about Sarah was only half the truth. Now he looked at two identical pairs of eyes, two identical faces, two identical women who had drawn him into their game. But the strangest thing was that he was not as angry as he expected. He should have snapped, slammed the door, left, and forgotten about all this. But instead, he became thoughtful. "You're silent," Mia remarked, crossing her arms over her chest. Usually people react differently. Jack raised an eyebrow. "For example, how? Are they running away in panic?" Mia shrugged. "Some. Others make a scene. You look like you're thinking about a new book." He grinned, although a storm of emotions was still raging inside. "Maybe so," he muttered. "But if I decided to leave, I would have left already." Sarah looked at him with concern. "So you're staying?" Jack nodded. "Yes. But if I stay, I want to change the rules." Mia raised an eyebrow. Her interest was genuine. "And what are the new rules?" Jack ran his fingers along the table thoughtfully. His voice became firm and confident. "You played with me, changed places, hid the truth. Now everything will be different. No more secrets. No more substitutions. If I stay, I want to know who I'm talking to, who I'm kissing, who I'm spending time with. I need honesty." Sarah and Mia looked at each other. This was the first condition that went against their usual way of life. They are used to being one whole. They are used to not dividing their personality into two halves. "And what else?" Sarah asked carefully. "We're not just continuing your game," Jack said, leaning forward. "We're turning it into something new. Something more. I want to write a book about this." Now both sisters froze. "A book," Mia repeated. "Yes, a story about a man who finds himself between two identical but different women. A story with no right answer. Did you want an experiment? Then let's make it really interesting." Sarah looked at him with wide eyes. She understood that Jack was not just accepting their game, he was taking control into his own hands. Mia, on the contrary, smiled. She loved challenges. "It's even intriguing," she drawled. "But are you sure you can handle it?" Jack grinned. "Let's see. But now it's my game." Several days have passed since Jack accepted their game and proposed his own rules. Now everything was different. No secrets, no substitutions. Just the three of them and their strange, confusing story in which no one knew where it would all lead. He moved in with them. This decision was easier for him than he expected. He no longer wanted to run away. He was not looking for a way out of this situation. On the contrary, he wanted to understand it more deeply. The sisters, although surprised, accepted his idea without hesitation. The apartment in which they lived was spacious, bright, but now filled with new dynamics. Jack watched how Sarah and Mia interacted with each other, how they divided responsibilities, how they sometimes argued, and then laughed, forgetting about the recent conflict. He felt part of their world, but was still trying to figure out his role. "What now?" Sarah asked one evening as they sat on the balcony with glasses of wine. "Now we live as we are," Jack answered. "No falsehood." Mia chuckled. "Do you really think that it's possible without falsehood? People are always hiding something." Jack shrugged. "Maybe so, but we can at least try." They started talking about the future. What's next? How long will this strange relationship last? Jack had no answers. He understood that the world would not accept their relationship, that someone would say that it was wrong. But he didn't care. Sarah saw this as an opportunity. She began to draw more, inspired by their story. Her paintings became richer and deeper. Something new appeared in them, a combination of passion and chaos, symmetry and imbalance. Mia, on the contrary, began to write more. She kept a diary, recording every detail of their lives, trying to preserve this moment. "We have to create something out of this," she said one day, handing Jack a notebook. "A story, a book, a film, something that will remain after us." Jack thought about it. He felt that they were on the verge of something significant, but he did not know where it would lead. Life with my sisters quickly became a series of unpredictable events, and this weekend was no exception. Jack, Sarah, and Mia decided to go out of town to unwind a little and have a change of scenery. They rented a lake house, hoping for a relaxing 2 days of relaxation. But as it soon turned out, peace is not their thing. The first surprise happened on the way. Jack, who for some reason allowed Mia to drive, very soon regretted it. She drove like she was in a street race. Sarah sat in the passenger seat and laughed out loud, while Jack grabbed the door handle, cursing everything in the world. "Mia, will we even make it there alive?" he shouted when the car once again almost demolished the road sign. "If you don't yell, maybe," she replied, winking cheerfully in the rearview mirror. Having reached the house without casualties, although Jack was sure that he now had a couple of gray hairs, they began to unload their things. Sarah was enthusiastically sorting out the groceries, Mia was trying to light a fire, and Jack just hoped that no one would burn the house down ahead of time. The real chaos began in the evening when they decided to play truth or dare. "Jack, truth or dare?" Mia asked with a grin, pouring herself another glass of wine. "Action," he shrugged, not suspecting what kind of stupidity he was about to do. "Great. Then run naked to the shore and back," she immediately said. Sarah clapped her hands in encouragement. "I support you. If you refuse, you will have to cook us breakfast for a week." Jack sighed heavily, but knew there was no turning back. Trying not to think about what he was doing, he pulled off his clothes and rushed to the water, accompanied by the laughter of the girls. When he returned, all he could say was, "I hope the locals didn't call the police." The next day, another surprise awaited them. The electricity in the house was turned off. While Sarah tried to light the candles and Jack tried to figure out the fuses, Mia came up with a solution. "Let's just have a candlelit dinner and tell the stupidest stories from life." The stories turned out really idiotic. Jack told how he once accidentally sent his ex-girlfriend a message intended for his editor with the phrase, "Your style is so damn hot." Sarah shared how at school she accidentally called a teacher mom in front of the whole class, and Mia admitted that she once fell into the pool in front of a crowd because she was trying to walk like a supermodel. Jack hasn't felt so comfortable and excited at the same time for a long time. His relationship with Sarah and Mia was like two different books, each with its own intrigue, but with a common hero himself. He spent nights with Mia where every detail was thought out, just like in his novels. She loved the atmosphere, the candles, the slow dancing to old vinyl records. Their sex was like reading a good book slow, but full of deep feelings. "Can you feel it, Jack?" It's like time is slowing down just for us, Mia whispered, looking into his eyes. You make every moment special, Mia. It's like we're writing our own story, he replied, touching her lips gently. Sarah, on the other hand, was a fire that could burst into flames at any moment. She loved the spontaneity where they could start with a kiss in the door and end on the kitchen table. She brought an element of play and adventure into their relationship. Don't think, just feel, Jack. Live in this moment, Sarah whispered hoarsely, pulling him towards her. You're like a storm, Sarah. You never know where it will take you, he grinned, pulling her along with him. Jack, alternating his nights between Sarah and Mia, felt his life becoming fuller but also more complex. He loved both of them, but he understood that it could not last forever in this form. One evening, as the three of them gathered for dinner at Jack's apartment, Sarah and Mia exchanged glances of agreement and determination. They knew it was time to discuss what had been in the air for a long time. Jack, we were thinking, what if we could be together not just in turns, but all together? Sarah said carefully, watching his reaction. We feel like this could be something special, Mia added, covering his hand with hers. We already have a connection, but what if we add a little more to it? Jack was stunned, but also intrigued. The idea was new, but it had something of his love for new stories and challenges. Are you sure? I want it to be comfortable for all of us, he said thoughtfully, glancing over both of them. We both want this, Jack, Sarah said confidently. That could be our next step if you're ready. After a long discussion where they established their boundaries and consent, they decided. The evening turned into night, where the previous boundaries blurred. They started with light touches, laughter, and jokes to ease the tension. Sarah reached out to Jack first, kissing him slowly and sensually. Mia, at this time, ran her hand along his back, pressing closer. They moved carefully, exploring new sensations. This is incredible. It's like we're writing a new chapter, but together, Jack whispered in a broken voice, feeling the excitement growing. And this is just the beginning of our story, Jack, Mia smiled, sliding her fingers over his skin. Their first night together was full of discoveries. They explored every corner of each other, where every touch was a new line in their common poem. It was not just pleasure, but the creation of something unique, where all three of them were equal participants. Afterwards, lying in an embrace, they laughed at how incredible it all seemed, but right. They knew that this was the beginning of something new, something that could change their lives, making it not just a story, but an epic. Evenings in their house have long ceased to be ordinary. Jack, Sarah, and Mia turned them into a real ritual with glasses of wine, notebooks scattered on the table, and endless arguments that smoothly turned into laughter. They were working on a new book, and it was not just a novel. It was their story, translated into hints, metaphors, and dark humor. Okay, let's think about it. Jack leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Our main character finds out that he is dating two women at once, but instead of running away, he's starting to play by their rules, Sarah interjected, shaking her leg and scribbling something in a notebook. But he gradually realizes that he is not playing the game, but they are. So we are creating a character who loses control, Mia clarified, grinning, like a romantic thriller, but with perverted overtones. Isn't our life a perverted subtext? Jack snorted, taking a sip of wine. The sisters looked at each other and laughed. They didn't just write, they created while having fun. Discussions about the plot grew into ironic debates. What if the heroines are also confused? Sarah suggested. Imagine he gives one a compliment, thinking that it's the other. Or they confuse who likes what music, Mia added. It would be funny if he thought that one person liked jazz, but this is the other one. And you can also add a moment when one of them deliberately says something that does not correspond to their role substitutions, and he begins to suspect something is wrong, Jack thought. And at this moment real chaos begins. Sarah threw a pencil at him. Are you writing this novel or predicting our lives? Maybe it's both, he grinned. The night dragged on. They argued about the ending, came up with new scenes, and scrambled to write alternative dialogues. At one point, Mia even tried to imitate one of the scenes, acting out the dialogue as if they were rehearsing a play. In the end, it ended with them laughing, stretched out on the floor among the scribbled pages. When the clock passed 3 in the morning, Jack put down his laptop, leaned back on the sofa, and looked at the girls. Damn, we're creating something really cool. Sarah, lying on the floor, yawned and smiled. Or we just laugh at our own lives. Mia shook her head. What's the difference? The main thing is that it's fun. Jack nodded, looking at them. Jack stood backstage holding a copy of his new book. His fingers tightened around the hardcover as if that might add to his confidence. He was not used to such events, to the bright lights of the spotlights, to the noise of the crowd, to the anticipation filled with nervous excitement. But today was different. Today he didn't just present his work. Today he told his story, their story. Sarah and Mia sat in the front row, chatting casually among themselves. In identical black dresses, with identical sly smiles, they looked as if they knew that this evening belonged to them. In a sense, this was true. The organizer of the event, a woman of about 50 with impeccable posture and severe glasses, approached him. "Are you ready?" she asked with a smile. Jack nodded, getting into the right frame of mind. "Then come out. They are waiting for you." The audience greeted him with applause. He took a few steps towards the stage, exposing his face to the spotlight. Somewhere in the hall, cameras were clicking. Spectators looked at him with interest, holding brand new copies of his book in their hands. Jack cleared his throat as he walked up to the microphone. "Thank you for coming today." He paused, giving the audience a chance to calm down. "This is my new book, and this is perhaps the most personal story I have ever written." Silence reigned in the hall. He knew people were waiting for this speech. After the success of his previous book, many wanted to know what he would write next. But no one expected that his new novel would be so provocative. This story is about borders, about how easy it is to erase them, about how difficult it is to understand who we are if we are constantly surrounded by mirrors. He grinned, looking into the hall, and that love is chaos. Sometimes beautiful, sometimes destructive, but always inevitable. Someone in the audience chuckled quietly. Someone nodded, clearly imbued with the meaning of his words. I am often asked the question, how autobiographical is this book? Jack paused. The answer to this question is simple. Enough to keep you interested, but not enough to get me into trouble. The hall exploded with laughter. He saw Sarah and Mia grin as they looked at each other. But seriously, he continued, this book is the result of an amazing journey that changed me. It showed me that predictability is the enemy of creativity, that sometimes the most absurd, strangest decisions lead to the brightest moments in life, and that love. He looked at Sarah and Mia. Love comes in different forms, and it does not always fit into the standard framework. Applause filled the hall again. People were smiling. Someone was whispering about something. He felt that this evening would be special. After the speech, a question and answer session began. Readers asked him various questions about the writing process, about the meaning of certain scenes, about what it was like to write about such an unusual relationship. "How does your muse feel about the book?" asked one of the journalists. Jack grinned. "Well, there are two of them, and I think they are happy." At this moment, Mia, who was sitting in the front row, raised her hand. "Can I ask a question?" she asked. Jack grinned. "Certainly. Do you really think that the main character of the book did the right thing, that he made the right choice?" The hall froze. Jack leaned towards the microphone. "I think the right choice is the one that makes you happy. And the rest." He spread his hands. "Just literary details." The hall again burst into applause. After the official party, the buffet began. Jack walked among the guests, signed books, and talked with journalists. Sarah and Mia stayed close, watching with pleased grins. "That was cool," Sarah remarked, sipping champagne. "You look damn confident," Mia added, "just like a writer who finally understands what he wants." Jack grinned, but didn't have time to answer. At that moment, he felt someone staring at him. He turned his head and froze. She stood at the other end of the hall. Linda, his ex-wife. Their gazes met, and for a few seconds everything around disappeared. Time, distance, people, noise. All that was left were the two of them and the past, which suddenly came to life in this room. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. There was no anger or regret in her eyes, only interest. Jack squeezed the glass in his hand. Crap. He didn't expect this. Jack looked at Linda, feeling a strange mixture of emotions welling up inside him. Memories flooded in like an avalanche, moments of happiness, the bitterness of betrayal, the anger that he had carried within himself for a long time. But now, looking at her, he felt neither anger nor pain, just a mild surprise. Linda came closer, not taking her eyes off him. She looked a little hesitant, like someone who had been wanting to say something for a long time, but had never found the right moment. "Hi, Jack." Her voice was soft, careful. He nodded slowly, narrowing his eyes. "Linda, I didn't expect to see you here." She smiled weakly and looked around the hall where the guests still remained. "I saw an announcement about your presentation. I decided to come. I wanted to support you." Jack chuckled as he took a sip of his champagne. "Support? Interesting. I don't think I need it." Linda pursed her lips as if gathering her thoughts. I know I made a mistake," she finally said. Then, "With us. With you." Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at her carefully, trying to understand what she wanted. Her gaze darted. She nervously twisted the ring on her finger, which was no longer there. "And," he finally asked. She took a deep breath. "I broke up with him, Jack, with the one for whom I left, for a long time, and I've been thinking about you all this time, about us." Jack grinned, but there was no mockery or anger in his eyes, more like a slight sadness. "Did you think so? Linda, you're gone. You made a choice. And now I'm sorry," she interrupted. "I wanted to tell you this all this time. I wanted to know if I had a chance to fix everything." There was silence. Jack twirled the glass in his hands thoughtfully. Sarah and Mia are somewhere behind, laughing with someone, discussing his book. His new life has already begun. Without Linda, he survived without her, stopped depending on memories, and now she wants to come back into his life. He looked her straight in the eyes. "Linda, it's late." She blinked as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely," he answered calmly. "Everything has changed. I have changed. I have a different life now, and there is no place for the past." She looked away, trying to hide her disappointment. "I see," she said quietly. "So this is the end." Jack nodded, taking a step back. "It was the end even then. You just realized it later than I did." She paused for a moment, as if hoping he would change his mind, but he made no move. Linda then sighed, nodded, and turned around, but before walking away, she stopped and looked at him again. "Are you happy with them?" Her voice was quieter, almost hesitant. Jack thought for just a second, but then a slight smile touched his lips. "Yes, Linda, I'm happy." She nodded, lowering her eyes. Then, "Goodbye, Jack." And she disappeared into the crowd of guests. Jack looked after her, but there was an amazing calm inside. She no longer had power over him. He was free. "Everything is fine." A familiar voice rang out. He turned around. Sarah and Mia stood nearby, watching him. "Yes," he nodded, glancing at his glass. "It's just that the past reminded me of itself. But now it will remain there." Mia grinned. The bar was full of people. Laughter, clinking glasses, loud music, everything mixed into one chaotic, but surprisingly pleasant cocktail. It was Jack's evening. His book, full of sarcasm, dark humor, and candid moments, became a bestseller, and now he stood in the spotlight, accepting congratulations. Sarah and Mia stayed close, alternately clinging to his hands, as if emphasizing that this triumph was their common one. They were his inspiration, his challenge, his strangest, but most true story. "Well, Mr. Celebrity," Mia nudged him with her elbow. "Tell me, what does it feel like to know that thousands of people are reading about you and us?" Jack chuckled, raising his glass. Honestly, scary. Now anyone can see how crazy I am. Or how brilliant you are, Sarah added, grinning. They clinked glasses, drinking to success, to the book, to the strange, but damn exciting life they were building together. Everything was going perfect, until she approached them, a tall blonde with flawless makeup, a dress that fits her like a second skin, and a smile that usually turns off critical thinking in men. Jack, her voice was low, purring. I just wanted to say that your book is incredible. Reading it, it seemed to me that you were writing about me. Sarah and Mia raised their eyebrows in unison, looking at the stranger. Jack, barely holding back his laughter, replied, Oh, really? And in which chapter exactly? The one where the main character loses his head because of a femme fatale, she answered languidly, leaning slightly closer. Mia snorted quietly, and Sarah leaned towards Jack, deliberately hugging his waist. Did you hear, my love? It turns out we have competition. Her voice was laced with mockery. Mia added, grinning. Maybe we should ask her what else in the book she thinks to herself. The blonde hesitated for a second, clearly not expecting such a united front. Jack, unable to bear it, laughed and hugged both girls. I'm afraid, ladies, but this story already has an ending, and I am more than happy with him. Sarah and Mia laughed, and the stranger, pretending that it was just an innocent joke, quickly disappeared into the crowd. They looked at her, after which Mia patted Jack on the shoulder with a grin. Well, now we know that you are a star not only among readers. You bet, Sarah played along. Maybe it's time to make the second part of the book. How to survive in a triangle and not go crazy. Jack grinned as he looked at them. I think I'm already writing this in real time. And they clinked glasses again, noting not only the success of the book, but also the fact that their story was far from over. A year has passed. Everything changed, but perhaps the most surprising thing was that their strange, chaotic, chaos-filled story gained not only stability, but also a new continuation. Jack stood on the balcony of their country house, holding a cup of coffee in his hands. He looked at the horizon, where the rising sun painted the sky soft orange-pink hues. Light steps were heard from behind, and then someone's warm hands hugged his waist. Are you philosophizing again? Sarah's voice was soft, but mocking. He turned and saw her pressing her palm to her slightly rounded belly. Something squeezed pleasantly inside him. A few seconds later, Mia joined them, with the same radiant look and with the same gesture hand on her stomach. Double joy, Jack said with a smile, looking around at them. Do you realize that in a few months our lives will turn into chaos? Mia asked, leaning against him. Yes, but it seems that we are already accustomed to chaos, aren't we? He chuckled, kissing the top of her head. Sarah laughed, looking at him adoringly. Only this time you will be not just a writer, but also a father. Do you think you can handle it? Jack pretended to think and then smiled. Well, if I can survive two crazy twins, I think I can handle two little versions of you. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.